access to. I think I filled in a lot of blanks.
But a lot of it's speculation. A lot of it is your guess, and we're talking about, you know, an impeachment of the president of the United States. So the evidence here ought to be pretty darn good.
I've been very clear as to when I was presuming, and I was presuming on the aid. On the other things, Mr. Castor, I did have some texts that I read from. So when it comes to those, I'll rely on those texts because I don't have any reason to believe that those texts were, you know, falsely sent. There's some subterfuge there. They are what they are. They say what they say. Thank you, sir.
I'm back.
Thank you.
Now the gentleman has expired. We'll now move to a second snap with round of 30 minutes. Mr. Volker, I just have a few questions before I turn it back to Mr. Goldman. You testified in response to my colleagues in the minority, something along the lines of a lot of people did not make the connection between charisma and
container that
a lot of people
when is
have real
loving,
difficulty understanding that.
she thinks it's
Morrison
amazing.
testified that I think it took him all of doing a Google search to find out,
It has a
this
nice
is the significance of charisma.
Illuminati style
Involves the Bidens.
sticker on it.
Are you saying during all this time up until the call, you never made the connection between charisma and the Bidens? You just thought that
We have
the
to be
president and Rudy
smoking while
Giuliani were interested
watching
in
this hearing.
one particular Ukrainian company?
It's the only way to make it
Again,
tolerable.
My role, Mr. Chairman, is just to get the meeting.
I understand that, but my question is, are you saying that for months and months, notwithstanding everything Rudy Giuliani was saying on TV and all the discussion with Rudy Giuliani, that you never
They had a
put
super
charisma
diamond
together with the
one,
Bidens?
I didn't, and I wasn't paying attention to what
but
Mr.
I
Giuliani
was hiring.
was talking to him directly.
Let me ask,
Kind of
let me
annoyed
ask you
because y'all
this.
know I do.
Mr. Volker testified yesterday to a similar epiphany, for lack of a better word. This is what he said. In hindsight,
Not that the diamonds
I now
look
understand
pretty.
that others on the idea of investigating possible corruption involving the Ukrainian company Burisma as equivalent to investigating former Vice President Biden. I saw them very different, as very different. The former being appropriate and unremarkable, the latter being unacceptable. In retrospect, I should have seen that connection differently, and had I done so, I would have raised my own objections.
So
Does that sum up
let's
your
see how
views
it
as well?
is.
It does.
Now, I think you were asked a question with a bit of a incorrect premise by my colleagues in the minority about Fiona Hill saying that, referring to a drug deal between you and Mr. Mulvaney. It was Mr. Bolton who made the comment that he didn't want to be part of any drug deal that Ambassador Sondland and Mulvaney were cooking up. No one thinks they're talking about a literal drug deal or a drug cocktail. The import, I think, of Ambassador's comments is quite clear that he believed that this bargain, this quid pro quo, as you described it over a meeting, the investigations to get the meeting was not something he wanted to be a part of. What I want to ask you about is, he makes reference in that drug deal to a drug deal cooked up by you and Mulvaney. It's the reference to Mulvaney that I want to ask you about. You testified that Mulvaney was aware of this quid pro quo, of this condition that the Ukrainians had to meet, that is, announcing these public investigations to get the White House meeting. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of people were aware of it, and
including Mr. Mulvaney.
Right.
And including the Secretary of State. Correct. Now, have you seen the acting chief of staff's press conference in which he acknowledged that their aid was withheld in part because of a desire to get that 2016 investigation you talked about?
I don't think I saw it live. I saw it later. Yeah.
So you saw him acknowledge publicly what you have confirmed too, that Mr. Mulvaney understood that 2 + 2 = 4. Is that right?
Well, again, I didn't know that the aid was conclusively cut. I was presuming he was in a position to say yes it was or no it wasn't, because
he said yes it was.
He said yes it was.
Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again, Ambassador Sondland. We do appreciate your efforts to refresh your recollection of the documents, and we understand, we share your frustration in not having the documents to help guide this investigation. So we do appreciate those efforts. One of the documents that you provided to us goes back to conversation you and the chairman were having about Mr. Mulvaney. And you had been trying for some time before the July 25th call to set up that call. Is that right?
To set up the call between President Trump and President Zelensky. Yes.
Correct, yes. And I want to show you an email that you reference in your opening statement. That is a July 19th email. And who is this from?
It looks like is it from me? I know.
It's from you, I believe.
That's from me to the group.
Now, who is the group?
People mentioned on the email: Blair, Tenet, McCormack, Mulvaney, Perry, Pompeo.
And who's Robert Blair?
I believe he's a deputy chief of staff or a advisor to the chief of staff.
Is the executive secretary for Secretary Pompeo. Who's Brian McCormack?
The chief of staff, or he was the chief of staff for Secretary Perry.
And then we see Mr. Mulvaney, Secretary Perry, Secretary Pompeo. Can you read what you wrote on July 19th to this group, please?
To receive POTUS call, will assure him that he intends to run a fully transparent investigation. We'll turn over every stone. We would greatly appreciate a call prior to Sunday so you can put out some media about a friendly and productive call, no details, prior to Ukraine election on Sunday.
So Sunday was the 21st, which was the date of the parliamentary elections in Ukraine, is that right?
That's right.
When you say we'll assure him that he
I didn't want to
intends
take
to
it
run
all
a
up.
fully transparent investigation and
didn't
will,
want to
quote,
take it
turn over every stone, unquote, what do you mean there?
I'm referring to the Burisma and the 2016/Yancey server investigations.
Later that evening, Secretary Perry responds just to you and Brian McCormack, saying, Mick just confirmed the call being set up for tomorrow by NSC, RP. And then a little later, Mr. Mulvaney replies to all, saying, I asked NSC to set it up for tomorrow. Were these the only responses that you received to this email?
I don't know. If I have them, I would show them. I don't know.
No one wrote back to you and said, what are you talking about in terms of these investigations and turning over every stone?
No, there was a chain, and I don't know if it's part of this email or a subsequent email, where I believe Ambassador Bolton pushed back and said he did not want a call to President Zelensky made by President Trump until after the parliamentary elections.
So that would explain why it was moved from the next day, July 20th to the 25th, right?
That's right.
But Ambassador Bolton is not on this email, is he?
I don't think he is.
Now, you were asked by Mr.
Okay.
Castor if there are any other witnesses who might be able to help with our investigation. And you mentioned Brian McCormack, right, the Chief of Staff for Secretary Perry.
I did.
You are aware that the committee subpoenaed him, are you not?
I wasn't aware of that.
And that he refused to come testify? Are you also aware that Mr. Mulvaney was subpoenaed by the committee and refused to come testify?
I did read that in the newspaper. Yes.
Are you also aware that Robert Blair was subpoenaed and refused to come testify?
I think I'm aware of that.
And that Secretary Perry was asked to come testify and refused?
I am aware of that as well.
So would you include them, as well as Secretary Pompeo, as key witnesses that would be able to provide some additional information on this inquiry?
I think they would.
You know, I'm cold, but I'm also low-key thinking I could still make
This
the
was not
GO.
the first time, as you indicated, that Mr. Mulvaney
I need to go there. to get
heard
some
about
groceries.
these investigations into Burisma and the 2016 election.
Do you want to do it?
Is that right?
We can go right now.
I don't know what Mr. Mulvaney
groceries
heard
do
or
we need?
didn't hear. I think there's
I
been a
need groceries for
huge amount of exaggeration over my contact with
Ms.
Mr.
Barry,
Mulvaney.
get them
It was actually
now.
quite limited.
Exactly.
Well, he certainly
You're still dressed.
indicated a
Still
familiarity
mobile.
with what you were talking about in this July 19th.
Respect to X-Men.
Right,
Took
because I
off the
think
stream.
Mr.
Let's
Mulvaney
go.
was
Let's
in
make a
the
run.
May
Let's do
23rd.
that.
But the thing is, I
Briefing with
haven't really
President Trump.
smoked enough
I
to go
don't
back to
remember because there were people sitting behind us that were coming
Dab
and going. When we
Chain
were
the-
sitting in front of
Yeah,
President
exactly. I
Trump's
really
desk.
need to like chain dab it.
Now, you said that you don't have a
Chain dab,
recollection
chain dab,
of
chain dab, chain dab.
Put one on each end
saying,
of the stick.
referencing Mulvaney in the July 10th
Set me
meeting
up
in
too.
Ambassador Bolton's office. Is that right? Or,
I don't recall.
I don't recall.
so when both Fiona Hill
Watch
and
how big
Colonel
and
Vin,
green.
in response to a question from Ukrainian officials at that July 10th meeting, I spoke with Mr. Mulvaney, and it will be scheduled after they announce these investigations. Do you have any reason to dispute that characterization?
I don't have any reason to agree or dispute it. I just don't remember.
So if they both remembered it and they both
I'm not
went
agreeing,
and
I'm not
spoke to
disputing,
the
but I don't
NSC
recall.
legal
I'm
advisor
just
about
a
it,
silly bitch.
would trust
But
that
do I
whoever
recall?
related to the NSC legal advisor would likely be an accurate
Again,
reflection.
I trust that they related to the NSC legal advisor. I don't know whether I said it, and I don't know which conversation.
These
Again,
people
Maybe
check.
I said it before, maybe I didn't say it. When did I say it though? I don't
This
know.
email indicates that
Oh man, oh gee.
spoke to President Zelensky and were relaying
Ah,
what he
gee.
said to very senior officials. Is that right? Sorry, the July 19th email. Where you
July
say
19th,
the
is that a
subject is, I
day?
called Zelensky just
Ah,
now.
gee.
Um,
Let me check my files.
was
Ah,
there some
gee.
sort of assurance that President Zelensky needed to provide about what he would say to President Trump in order just to get the phone call?
Still no response this whole time.
I think that part was verbal, and then there were a lot of communications going around back and forth with the Ukrainians, and that's when someone, and I don't remember who, came up with the idea of a draft statement, so there would be no misunderstanding about what in fact the Ukrainians would say and would be willing to say. That we could rely on negotiate something on a piece of paper.
So just to place you in time, we're going to get to that draft statement, which was in August. This is July.
That was in August. Oh, jeez, that's the wrong day. Oh, gee.
White House officials or other national security officials for President Zelensky to provide some assurance of what he would say to President Trump before a phone call, not the meeting, but a phone call was scheduled.
Oh, gee.
There was initially apparently a condition, but that condition was obviously dropped because the phone call took place.
Someone
There was no
is
such statement
a
made. The phone call
master
took place, as you said, on the 25th of
at
July.
talking in circles.
When you say there was no such statement that took place, what
Did
do
you
you mean?
chain those apps?
Well, the Ukrainians never
Did
made
you do a wrap? Did you
Why?
do
public
a quick turnaround?
prior to the phone call on the 25th of July.
Right, but we're not talking about a public statement. What I was asking is
That's not even a response to what I said. What I'm saying,
relay. to
will you
or the
respond
other
what to what
American
I'm asking?
that he
What
would
I'm
assure
asking
President
is-
Trump that he would do these investigations in a phone call. That is,
Well, in my email, I obviously had just spoken with him, and he beat Zelensky, and he said that he was prepared to receive the call.
But he
and
asked
would
him about
make those
Trump.
assurances to President Trump on that call, and then presumably that would then.
Well,
lead to White House
presumably,
and you had been
What is
discussing
with
this
this
phone call
hole
for
in
quite
the middle of his
several
chin?
weeks now. Is that right?
Is that where he
Yes,
plugs in
I
at
think
night?
with,
that's clearly his
Volker,
aux
with Perry,
cord,
with,
Quinn. It's clearly his aux plug,
Giuliani, through
so.
Volker and Perry.
And then right after you sent this email assuring the others that he will discuss the investigations and will turn over every stone, the Burisma 2016 election investigations, Mr. Mulvaney responded that he asked to set up the call for the next day. Is that right? That's what it says.
That's what it
Now
says.
let's go to that.
Is that right?
statement
Well, that's what it
we were
says.
Discussing in August, and you testified.
I don't
believe
recall
that, you
that.
understood that Rudy Giuliani was representing the president's interests with regard to Ukraine. Is that right?
That's what we all understood.
And when you
Is that right? That's what everyone understood at the time.
Ambassador Volker, myself.
In August, you and Ambassador Volker.
The way he group
Zelensky
snitches.
about a
Like, he
press
literally makes it so that
And
he's not only
I want to,
snitching,
pull
he's
up some of
making
the text
everyone who
exchanges that you
isn't,
were
who
referring
didn't
to,
go there to snitch,
that you acknowledge
snitch. He's
helps you
forcing
refresh your
everyone who
recollection, is that
didn't
right?
go in on
Perhaps
this group
was-
text.
does not remember
All
that.
of us know. Like,
Let's go to
I'm
the
not
first
the
one.
only one snitching. This is a ghost snitch.
On, August
Like, they're phantom snitching while I'm snitching, to be clear.
there's an
like-
exchange between Ambassador Volker and
I'm
you,
snitching for them.
where you
So
are everyone's
everyone's snitching while I'm snitching. So-
You're snitches by association.
yeah, don't think that we didn't still all snitch. Everyone snitched.
And you
Via
said
me.
Morrison ready
They
to
got
get
their
James
pictures
Sirleaf
up on the
confirms
screen
Mr. Volker
via
or Ambassador
WhatsApp
Volker's
group
excellent
message.
evidence
Like, nigga,
with him.
everybody has
Hmm.
snitched.
Said nothing
Clear.
to this really
Okay?
was that the-
I got the group messages up on the screen during the hearing. So you snitched via me. Like,
Conversation with him.
I hope you didn't think that not going to trial and ditching that warrant, like,
Going to the next.
Yeah.
wasn't gonna
to
make you
10,
not a
where,
snitch.
Right.
So
August 10th, rather. This is between you and.
that's
and
why he
Andre
was laughing at
Yermak.
the table, like,
What did you say?
everybody's about to snitch.
All it takes is one asshole to show up and be like, well, I'm cutting the deal.
How was your conversation?
Mr. Yermak
It only takes one guy to be willing to cut a deal.
Everybody's
Then we
about
make
to
general
snitch.
statement with discussed things.
They just don't know
Once
it.
we have a date,
I got
we'll
them
call for a
WhatsApp
press briefing
messages.
about the upcoming visit.
I was screenshotting all the time. They have the 24-hour delete setting, but I was a screenshot bitch.
Respond. Got it. That's your understanding of what the statement had to say to satisfy Mr. Giuliani, is that right? Yes. And then ultimately to satisfy the POTUS deliverable? Yes. Now, the next day you write an email to Ulrich Breckbull and Lisa Kenna. Are you able to see that on your?
Yeah, I can see it on the screen. Yeah.
Okay. What is the subject of the email?
Ukraine.
And can you read?
That's not a very
What you wrote
sneaky
there.
subject.
Mike,
For an
and I'm
email.
referring to Secretary Pompeo. Kurt and I negotiated a statement from
I just want them
Zelensky
to know that.
to be delivered for our review. and
Has anybody credited the Republican
Contents
Party
of
with
what
an
makes the
abundance of
boss happy
cleverness in the
enough
last
to
couple
authorize-
decades?
Well, this is the whole everybody. I just want everybody to know no one's functioning under sneakiness lately.
No.
Specifics.
No.
And in your opening statement, you said that the
Nobody has
specifics
chill.
rep-
Nobody has
what does the
sneakiness.
specifics represent?
Nobody's slick.
2016 in the Burisma.
Nobody.
And when you say the boss, who do you mean by that?
President Trump
The invitation is what?
to the White House meeting.
And Lisa Kenner responds, Gordon, I'll pass to S. And S is Secretary Pompeo?
Correct.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, 2 days later, you have a
This guy's
text
dad
exchange with
haircut is
Ambassador
amazing.
Volker again. And
He's not above and
this is at the end
beyond.
of it, but the earlier text, which we don't have here, you may recall, includes the press statement, the revised press statement that includes Burisma and the 2016 election. Do you call that?
Yes, if I could see it, that would be helpful, but yes.
I can't recall.
So, but you ultimately remembered that after your conversation with Mr. Giuliani, you did pass along a statement to the Ukrainians that included Burisma in the 2016 election.
Am I wrong?
I think there were statements being passed back and forth between Volker, the Ukrainians, and others to try. and
Notice the
negotiate
shorthand of what he's
something.
saying.
And ultimately, the statement was not issued, was it?
Correct.
And the White House meeting did not,
Still hasn't occurred.
still hasn't occurred. But you certainly understood at that time, did you not, that it was the president's direction and instruction that a White House meeting with President Zelensky would not occur until President Zelensky announced publicly the investigations that the president wanted. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you now know that the investigations the president wanted was an investigation into the Bidens and an investigation into the 2016 election.
I know that now.
I know that now. I don't quite recall though.
I'm going to move ahead to August 22nd.
I'm going to be honest about that.
And you wrote an email to Secretary Pompeo, directly to Secretary Pompeo, CCing Lisa Kenna, the subject of Zelensky. And could you please read what you wrote to Secretary Pompeo?
Mike, should we block time in Warsaw for a short pull-aside for POTUS to meet Zelensky? I would ask Zelensky to look him in the eye and tell him that once Ukraine's new justice folks are in place mid-September, Zelensky should be able to move forward publicly and with confidence on those issues of importance to POTUS and to the U.S. Hopefully that will break the logjam.
Secretary Pompeo responds to you 3 minutes later, yes. Now, I want to unpack this a little bit. You said that in the middle, once Ukraine's new justice folks are in place, what did you mean by that?
The new prosecutor that was going to be working for President Zelensky, the old prosecutor, I believe his term was up or he was being let go. He was the Poroshenko prosecutor, and Zelensky wanted to wait until his person was in place.
So once that new prosecutor was in place, then President Zelensky, should be able to move forward publicly and with confidence on those issues of importance to POTUS. What did you mean by those issues of importance to POTUS?
Again, the 2016 election and Burisma investigation.
Were you aware at this time that Secretary Pompeo had listened in to the July 25th phone call?
I was not.
If he had, do you believe that he would fully understand what the issues of importance to POTUS related to Ukraine would be?
I mean, I can't characterize his state of mind. He listened in on the phone call.
I don't recall.
Concluded what he concluded.
But now that you've read the phone call, it's quite clear what the issues of importance
Unrecallable.
to POTUS are. Biden investigation, yes, 2016 election investigation. Is that right?
That's correct.
Of course,
Then
now
it
I
says,
recall.
hopefully, that will break the log jam. Now, by this point, you were aware that security assistance had been on hold for about 5 weeks. Is that
Convenient
right?
recollection.
I became aware on the 18th of July.
And
That's when I was
you
able to
understood
recall.
that
Gordon
a lot of
Sondland
activity
is also
within
a
the
piece of
State
shit,
Department elsewhere
but
to try
he's a
to
snitchy piece of shit.
get that
So
whole
I
He's
can.
perfectly
That's
able to talk in
just
circles.
about everybody
Mhm.
in the interagency, meaning the national security apparatus.
One snitchy
wanted
piece
to
of
lift the
shit.
hold
And
and
one guy
wanted to go to
who you
Correct.
know you
So
treat
what
a
did
little
you
bit
mean here when
wrong,
you said
or he
log
just
jam?
didn't feel appreciated
Well, as
enough.
I said to Chairman Schiff,
You fuck your shit up.
I meant inclusively anything that was holding up moving forward on the meeting and the Ukraine-U.S. relationship.
And what was holding that up?
At that point, it was the statements about the 2016 election.
But what was being held up?
Well, the aid was being held up, obviously.
4 days later, you said in your opening statement that you sent Rudy Giuliani's contact information to John Bolton. Is that right?
I did.
Did you know why he asked for that?
No idea.
Did you know that he was going to Ukraine the next day?
I knew he was about to go to Ukraine. I didn't know exactly when his trip was, but I thought it was kind of an odd request. The White House can pretty much get anyone's phone number they want.
Now, in this email to Secretary Pompeo, you referenced a trip to Warsaw. Ultimately, the vice president went on that trip.
That's correct.
And that was the conversation that you talked about, you testified earlier to, that where you said that we really need to get these investigations from Ukraine in order to release the aid in the pre-meeting.
That's right.
And Vice President Pence just nodded
He heard what I said.
and didn't respond in any way.
I don't recall any substantive response.
But you never specifically referenced the Bidens or Burisma in that meeting, did you?
I don't remember ever mentioning the Bidens. I didn't mention the reason.
In that meeting, you was with a group. You were not alone with Biden. That's right. And you know that at that bilateral meeting with President Zelensky, I believe you testified earlier that Vice President Pence did not mention these investigations at all, right?
I don't recall mentioning investigations.
So that your testimony is just simply in a pre-meeting with a group of Americans before the bilateral meeting. You referenced the fact that Ukraine needed to do these investigations in order to lift the aid.
I think I referenced, I didn't say that Ukraine had to do the investigations. I think I said that we heard from Mr. Giuliani that that was the case.
So that helped inform your presumption, correct?
Correct.
So it wasn't really a presumption. You heard from Mr. Giuliani.
Well, I didn't hear from Mr. Giuliani about the aid. I heard about the Burisma in 2016.
And you understood at that point, as we discussed 2 + 2 = 4, that the aid was there as well.
That was the problem, Mr. Goldman. No one told me directly that the aid was tied to anything. I was presuming it was.
Right. Well, I want to go ahead to, I want to go back
Well, you present.
on September 1st, or I'm going to jump actually ahead to September 7th, okay? When we discussed those text messages where you said there were multiple convos with President Zelensky and POTUS, you recall that?
Do you have the email by any chance?
I don't recall.
You don't remember I showed it to you?
Yeah, just go ahead.
My nigga, I literally, he's like, I swear to God, if you don't stop fucking with me, I'm gonna burn this place to the ground. You see how mad he's getting? He's like, y'all don't remember when I brought it out earlier? Y'all don't all remember? Everyone in here remembers that I brought that email out here earlier. Everyone in here remembers I brought it out earlier, right? He's the only one in here that doesn't remember that I brought the email out. Okay. No, I'm gonna calm down. Sure. I'll get the email back out. No problem. I'll get it back out. Okay. You better stop fucking with me.
Trump, is that right?
Again.
Literally, last time he interviewed him, the second it was over. Like Chuck was
Discussed
saying,
those
like,
text messages where you said there were multiple convos with President Zelensky and POTUS. You recall that?
Do you have the email?
We can try to pull it up in a second, but you don't remember I showed it to you?
Yeah, just go ahead though, with your question.
no, you
And
don't remember. I showed it to you.
That likely meant, as you said it did, that you spoke with President Trump. Is that right?
He's like, I really have to show you
Again, if my email
everything,
said I spoke
every
with President
single
Trump,
damn time.
You are relying pretty heavily in your testimony on the text and emails that you were able to review. Is that right?
That's right.
So certainly if someone else had contemporaneous texts, emails, or notes, you would presume that what they were saying was accurate. Is that correct?
Well, if they had texts or emails, I would. If they had notes, I don't know. Some people's notes are great, some people's aren't. I don't know.
Oh my God.
But certainly a pressure to anyone's memory.
He will not stop fucking with
Now, you
him.
had a conversation on September 7th, according to both Ambassador Taylor and Tim Morrison, where you told Mr. Morrison that President Trump told you that he was not asking for a quid pro quo, but that he did insist that President Zelensky go to a microphone and say that he is opening investigations of Biden and 2016 election interference, and that President Zelensky should want to do this himself. You don't have any reason to dispute both Ambassador Taylor's and Mr. Morrison's testimony about that conversation, do you?
No.
On September 8th, you then had a conversation directly with Ambassador Taylor about this same phone call, where Ambassador Taylor said that you confirmed that you spoke to President Trump as he suggested earlier.
I don't even think they'll let us endorse me.
President Trump was adamant that President Zelensky
Wait, 3
himself,
minutes till the store technically
not the prosecutor
closes.
general,
5 minutes?
had to, quote, clear things up and do it in public, unquote. You recall, you don't have any reason to think that Ambassador Taylor's testimony based on his contemporaneous notes.
I don't know if I got that from President Trump or I got it from Giuliani. That's the part I'm not clear on.
Well, Ambassador Taylor is quite clear that you said President Trump. Mr. Morrison is also quite clear that you said